welcome to Movies That Move Me. I'm your host, Elijah Winfrey. It's been far too long, my friends, but I'm back and hopefully going to be a little bit more consistent with these episodes coming out on a weekly basis for you as I talk about the films that made me want to be a filmmaker. That's what this is. It's not really about like movie reviews per se, it's about the movies that move me into actually wanting to make movies. So that's what this whole thing is about. Last episode, we talked about the prequel trilogy for Star Wars. Now we're going to talk about the original trilogy, or as fans now know them as episode 4, 5, and 6. Quickly, my Star Wars fans who are finding me on this video, are you like me where you get a kick out of when you're introducing somebody to Star Wars and you tell them to go watch episode 4, 5, and 6, then go watch 1, 2, and 3? Do you get a kick out of the look on their face when you tell them that? Because I always do. Because it does go against what you would normally think to do, which is watch 1, 2, and 3. But I always tell people to watch the originals because that's how I experienced it. And then I feel like 1, 2, and 3 have, a little bit more punch to them that way? Or are you just saying, hey, watch them in chronological order and forget about the years they came out? Let me know in the comments. I'd be curious about that. But as far as the first movie is concerned, Star Wars, or as we now know it, Episode 4, A New Hope, came out May 25th, 1977. I was a 1993 baby. So by the time, these movies came out, I still wasn't even thought of yet. By the time I came into the world, these movies had already been talked about and everything for years, right? So as a kid watching this in the 90s, I was just completely taken by all the different things on the screen, by the lasers, by the lightsabers, by the ships, by the costumes. I just thought it was so freaking cool. I still think it's freaking cool. But as a kid, that's all I was concerned about, okay? It was just what's on the screen and is it fun, right? And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. All three of these movies were. As an adult, though, I have a different appreciation for it because I am making movies of my own. I hear about a lot of the behind the scenes stories. I've gone searching for, how did they make this effect happen or how did they do this? And so that is the part that inspires me about the original trilogy, is all the behind the scenes stuff. Not so much the stories themselves, although the stories are really good, it's the behind the scenes stuff that gets me. Because I feel like even though they were, operating on some pretty big budgets for these films, I feel like they had the spirit of an independent filmmaker, of saying, how are we going to pull this off? And the stress and the deadlines and the self-imposed deadlines in some ways, you know, that's where I feel like, these movies really inspire me, that they really move me, is how they were able to make all that come together despite seemingly everything going wrong. And one story I heard about when I was taking the Martin Scorsese masterclass, which I would highly recommend to anybody who is trying to get into filmmaking. Scorsese was talking about when George Lucas had folks over to his home to watch the first initial cut of A New Hope. Now, Scorsese was not physically there when that happened, but he had heard about this story through the grapevine and was repeating it. And basically how the story goes is George Lucas invited a bunch of people over to watch the first cut of A New Hope, and he basically thought it was a train wreck. He thought the whole thing was a train wreck. And one of his friends, Steven Spielberg, was one of the people that was invited over to watch this movie. And so he's like, I don't know, Steven, I don't think this is going to work out. This is going to ruin me. Like, he was really nervous about this, which in hindsight is kind of funny because, like, obviously it's a fantastic movie series, right? But in the moment, it was the first one and everything had gone wrong. And so he's saying, Steven, this is going to ruin me. And Steven Spielberg said to him, listen, George, if you don't feel like vomiting when you watch the first cut of your movie, something's wrong. Now, I found that to be inspiring. So for other people, you might find that to be disgusting. But, for me as an independent filmmaker, when I'm making movies and I watch the first cut of my film, there are moments where I'm fist pumping and I'm like, yeah, that turned out great. But there are other moments where I'm like, oh my God, like I'm such an idiot for trying that, or that this wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. And so when I heard that in the Martin Scorsese class, it was one of the notes I made sure to write down because I thought it was such a cool story. And again, there's so many stories like that, which with George Lucas kind of feeling like he's going through imposter syndrome in a way. Like, I think I can do this, but then it doesn't really work out. When in reality, us as fans, we loved it, and that's what's kind of funny is like the experience that he was going through was so different than the experience we were all going through as fans. For him, it's like, oh my God, am I going to survive making this movie? And for us, it's like, oh my God, when's the next one? But for A New Hope, again, I really enjoyed the film. I was, really impressed with the spectacle of it all, as I think all of us were. But it's the behind the scenes of that movie that really inspire me. But that's kind of my thoughts on A New Hope. I will say that I try not to judge the original trilogy too hard on its lightsaber duels because I feel like they didn't exactly know what to do yet. They were still trying to figure it out. It's very experimental with those lightsabers. And then once they hit that prequel trilogy, they knew how to conduct a lightsaber duel, and they showed that off. As if you watch my last episode, I talked about that. That's one of the highlights of the prequel trilogy is the fights. I would not say that same thing when it comes to the original trilogy because I feel like it was kind of stiff and they were trying to figure out what to do with that. But the story itself of, the ragtag bunch going up against this, huge operation, again, that works. That works. And again, all the miniatures and everything, a lot of that behind the scenes stuff I nerd out on for sure. My favorite of the original trilogy, though, actually came out May 21st, 1980. That is Empire Strikes Back. I love this film. Like I said, it's my favorite of the original trilogy, and I know it's when kind of the bad guys win in a way. But for me, I always found the villains of Star Wars to be almost more interesting than the heroes in a way, especially in the original trilogy. And I know some people are not going to agree with me on that, and that's okay. But I do find myself sometimes in Star Wars rooting for those folks with the red lightsaber instead instead of the hero that you're supposed to root for. But in that movie, man, I really liked the dynamic between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Obviously, that is the famous line, right, from Star Wars. For folks who haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil anything, or at least attempt not to spoil anything. But that fight between them, uh, it doesn't last very long, but it's very meaningful, and you could really feel the stakes. Luke Skywalker, he now knows who Darth Vader is. He actually has some training behind him. That's the thing. In A New Hope, they don't really face off against one another because Luke Skywalker is not well versed in what to do with the lightsaber. He's still learning, right? And so this time we finally see them square off and duel a little bit. And so I really enjoyed that. I also, again, enjoyed a lot of the special effects stuff. Right, wrong, or in between. I kind of feel like George Lucas is like the godfather of CGI. That's my personal opinion. I know other directors use it quite a bit, but I feel like if George Lucas and his team did not really raise the stakes and push the envelope with CGI, we would not have CGI the way that it is today. That's just my personal opinion. And if you actually watch the credits on a lot of those Disney Marvel movies and things like that, you will see that, George Lucas's team, although now they're owned by Disney, they still are involved in all that type of stuff. So, but like I said, I view George Lucas as the godfather of CGI. And making editing softwares and different things like that. I think a lot of that has roots to George Lucas. Like I said, right, wrong, or in between, because there are some people that don't like CGI. But anyway, Empire Strikes Back, I really love that movie. Like I said, it's my favorite of the original trilogy. And then, of course, you have Return of the Jedi, May 25th, 1983. That's when that movie came out. And for me, I like this movie. I think the ending of this movie is what seals it for me. I will say that there's some parts of the movie that I feel lag a little bit, or maybe go on too long. But for me, like I said, it was the ending of the movie, and I try not to get into spoiler territory, but I'm gonna assume at this point that you've probably seen this film. Um, just how that redemption story works, that was really cool to me, because they carry this dark figure, if you will, Darth Vader, through three movies, right? And to me, what inspired me story wise was how they were able to redeem him at the end. You see so many, stories where you have I always call it the hesitant hero, not the person that's looking to save the day, but it's kind of forced into action. That's how I view Luke Skywalker. He's a hesitant hero. He's not trying to be the hero, but somebody's got to do it, right? And you see a lot of those type of stories. But I don't feel like you see a lot of stories, especially stretched out over three movies, where you see somebody go from he is a bad dude and you need to watch out for him. He is evil. And then all of a sudden at the end, you're like, oh, okay, like he's redeemed. And so I thought that, that part of it was really, really cool in Return of the Jedi. But as far as the original trilogy, again, I never want to be that person that says, oh, prequels are better than the original trilogy, because I feel like a lot of people do that. I'm not trying to say that. I like both of them for very different reasons. Again, if you didn't watch my other episode, I love the prequels because that's what I grew up with. But I also love and admire what they did with those original movies. And as far as the Disney stuff is concerned, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm lukewarm on it. I like some of the stuff they do. I don't like some of the stuff they do. Um, I think for me, the biggest thing is I love the fact that Star Wars continues to affect audiences long after its first movie. That's what really hits me whenever I think about Star Wars. Yes, I might not like everything, but not everything is, I'm not the target audience for everything either. The fact that we keep this thing alive, that's what's important to me as a fan. That, if I ever have kids and if they ever have kids, that we're still talking about Star Wars and that there's still Star Wars stuff for them to enjoy. That's what's important to me as a fan, not do I like it or do I not like it, if that makes any sense. But I know I went on for a long time there. But again, those movies, they certainly moved me. They started my whole thing with Star Wars. And then the prequels came in and kind of sealed it for me that, yes, this is one of my favorite. Not my top spot, but one of my favorite when it comes to the sci-fi genre. Again, that is Star Wars A New Hope, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars Return of the Jedi, movies that moved me. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you thought about all the things I said. If you disagree, let me know as well. I always tend to learn a lot from folks I disagree with, so feel free. Flood those comments. I certainly appreciate it. And until next time, my friends, be good to yourself, be good to others in that order. I'll see you soon.